Hello and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's webinar, which is all about empowerment through awareness. Slightly different to what we've covered over a previous month. We are very much focusing on that health and well-being, mental health, neurodiversity, domestic abuse, and a new sort of thing that we're being aware of, which is that sex extortion that is taking place. And really, today is all about raising that awareness. So we've got an action-packed sort of 2 hours ahead of us where we're talking and really diving into these. And we would really encourage sort of questions and interactions as well with a number of polls that we have taking place this morning. As we move through today's session and today's event, I would like to first of all give you an overview of what it is that we're going to be exploring and talking about, really. So we're joined by Emma, who is from the Better Health generation, and it's really all about embracing in neurodiversity, understanding, recognising, and supporting those individuals. We're also going to be hearing from Becky, who is a team member at Glow, which is part of the Honeycomb Group, and it's all about breaking the silence, raising the awareness of domestic abuse. We'll also hear from my colleague Jagdeep Soor. It's all about advancing inclusion, the latest sort of update from the multicultural initiatives that we have here at Pathway Group. We're also going to be speaking with Evita, and this is an individual that I met a few weeks ago at the Inspirational Youth Awards at Birmingham, where she was recognised for the work that she does with the Happy Autistic Lady. Really celebrating and recognising for the Inclusivity Award that she received there. And there we're looking at those, that unlocking that potential, boosting that productivity through neurodiversity awareness and that support as well. And you'll also be hearing from myself where we're talking about behind the screens, really understanding and preventing this sexualised extortion that is taking place. And it's becoming more and more prevalent out across the world, really, and just some of those dangers that are associated with social media. So we've got quite an interesting lineup, and a lot of it is really fixating on that neurodiversity. And I must say, from my point of view, it's only been the last few years that this sort of terminology has been sort of brought to my attention. And really, I'm hoping to learn a few new things as we go through today and really raise my own awareness and also yourselves as well. As I mentioned, we do have a number of opportunities of you sort of getting engaged with and getting involved today. Please use the chat function. There's also the Q&A function as well. So our speakers will be talking about their particular subjects, but you do have these opportunities where we can engage with them as well. We're also going to be running a number of polls throughout the morning. These polls are there for you to, again, interact with us. This can be useful information for our speakers to take away and really use this to how they then support others out there as well, and really how they tailor their support and their businesses at the same time. I just want to take a few minutes, first of all, to talk a bit about Pathway Group. So the reason you're all in here today is because you've got some sort of relationship with Pathway. You may be a learner that we're supporting. You could be an organisation that we're partnered with. You could be supporting through one of our many initiatives and networks. But just to sort of raise your awareness, Pathway Group, we've been established for well over 23 years now. We're at the heart of the West Midlands, and our initiatives are there to help upskill and reskill individuals, supporting them into sort of career opportunities and how they can progress on forward. As an organisation, we are committed to sort of social responsibility, and it's looking at how we can support those individuals as well. For myself, it's all about sort of careers and not courses. So we are an independent training organisation. However, what we're slightly different to some others that I would say is that we look to connect people to those employer and those career-led opportunities. So it isn't just doing a course for the sake of doing a course. It's being able to see what that long-term trajectory, what those next steps look like for the individuals as well. We are a skills and employability organisation. We work with public sector funds, so we work with a number of government departments and also combined authorities. So essentially, we are a recognised partner throughout many of the regions within the United Kingdom, and that we are an accredited partner We held the likes of our Investors in People Gold, various quality type marks, including the likes of the Matrix standard as well, which shows that the support and the services that we provide, but it's also that we've been scrutinised to the level of the service that we provide. As an organisation, we are social mobility first, so we look at we use those publicly funded solutions to support communities and workforces at the same time. We're promoting those initiatives that support education, professional training, and creating those opportunities for advancement as well. Our goal is to ensure that everybody, regardless of their starting point, has that fair chance to rise within sort of companies and receive those opportunities. One motto and mantra that we sort of work to is a job, a better job, a career. You know, where we support people into work, it's then how do they develop, how do they move forward, how do they go on to excel and prosper. We're a trusted partner across our initiatives. Just some of those organisations are showcased on the screen here, and you'll hear a little bit more from my colleague Jack Deepsaw as the morning goes on, just with the organisations that we actually work with and the support that we also provide out there as well. That is all I wanted to sort of go into and sort of touch upon, and really now it is for us to move into today's sessions really. So we're going to be welcoming on Emma just now, and Emily's going to be talking all about embracing neurodiversity, understanding and recognising, and how we actually support as well. So Emma, if I can ask you to come down onto the stage and join us, and we will start to hear from yourself and find out more about neurodiversity and really about embracing it as well. So welcome, Emma. So Emma is representing the Better Health Generation organisation. Emma, I understand you're very passionate about health, well-being, early years, and sort of working for a long period of time in that training sector. I know from our conversations as well, being very heavily involved within first aid training as well. But without me sort of rabbiting on too much, over to yourself to talk to us about that empowerment through neurodiversity and awareness, really. Thank you.
Hi, and thanks, Martin, for introducing me and having me here today. I'm Emma Davis. I'm from the Better Health Generation, and we support with all things health and well-being. I'm not going to go into huge details of what we cover, but we have a team of mental health nurses, general health nurses, occupational therapists, counsellors, psychotherapists, lifestyle coaches, and specialists in neurodiversity. It's one of the specialisms we focus on as well. We work quite heavily in the training sector, employability, education, corporate, to support with webinars, CPD, and various other aspects that companies might need in order to support their team. We work quite heavily, like I say, in the youth, with youth, sports, justice. So that's why we've been invited here today to talk to you about neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is a term used quite widely at the minute. It's actually derived from the difference in the way that people's brains work. So people who are classed as neurodiverse, they work differently to the average neurotypical person. So I've put on the screen here a little bit more information than I would do normally, purely because I think these slides are going to be shared with everybody. So I wouldn't normally go in so heavy, but I just wanted to for you guys to have something to take away, really. During this me talking, I really love you to engage with me. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I think it's really important for self-reflective practice. So please do ask any questions, and if I don't know the answers, I will get back to you. But if I do, then obviously I'll answer them in a timely way. So I'm going to move on to asking you guys a question. So hold on, I'm going to stay there for a second. So can anybody tell me any common neurodivergent conditions? Does anybody know any? Is anybody up to chatting with me in the chat box? I see it. Let me have a look. Anybody know any common neurotypical conditions? Anybody feeling brave enough to write in the chat box? Yeah. Fab. I think, yeah, these are great. These are the most common conditions that we come across day to day. Autism, ADHD, real Asperger's. Yeah, I've worked, my background is actually as a nanny. I've worked with a child who's had Asperger's before. I think the interesting point to remember about people who suffer with neurodiverse conditions is that they all present in different ways. So people can have it more severely, or they can just have slight traits. It completely depends. None of it actually presents in a typical way, so to speak. Everybody is different. And I actually really love that. And we're going to come on to, strengths of people who suffer with neurodiverse conditions in a minute. So I really love this table because it really gives you a clear idea of some of the common neurodiverse conditions out there. So Tourette's you've mentioned, autism, dyslexia's on there, dyspraxia. There's lots of different conditions on there. Anxiety, sensory processing is huge. And I'll come on to it in a sec on ways we can manage that in the workplace. And for yes, I do consider it. Well, I personally would say is a neurodiverse condition, but obviously it's not on the chart. But I think, sorry, people are asking lots of questions. That's great. It's so great to have this interaction. Yes, absolutely, because I think it presents itself in so many different ways, and it is just a different way of the brain working. So absolutely. So let's move on to this next bit. So we're going to list some strengths and challenges. So signs of neurodiversity can be issues with focus and concentration. So intense interest in particular things. So I've got a friend who is absolutely obsessed with computers. He can pull them apart and has been doing it since such a young age. So it's really interesting that they get quite fixated on a particular subject sometimes. They can have repetitive behavior, routines. Some call it OCD. Anybody, I mean, I'd probably slightly consider myself as having a bit of OCD. I'm sure there's lots of people out there who can relate to that. Difficulty following instructions, difficulty organizing themselves, processing sensory information, filtering out external stimulations. And obviously in the workplace and when training or when learning, these can be issues. And I think having the same foods, having the same foods over and over, absolutely. I think I am absolutely 100% guilty of that. I find something that I really like and I really enjoy, and then I kind of go back to it until I bore myself it, and then I move on to the next thing. So these are the challenges that I've just listed out. Can anybody out there relate to any of the challenges that I've just listed to? I've obviously got somebody here. I can't see your name. There's no name on there. There's just a user ID. But anybody else suffer with any of these difficulties? And phobias, absolutely. Finding it hard to say how you feel. That's great. Keep them coming, guys. It's really important that you guys use this as a reflective session as well. So how can we support these challenges? So I'll go through a couple of them and give you a couple of ideas. So issues with focusing and concentration, getting to a routine. So I know for myself that listening to certain types of music helps me. I play cricket and I lose my focus sometimes when I'm out batting. So what I will do for any cricketers out there is I'll walk between each ball, I'll walk out of the crease and then I'll walk back in again to reset myself. For people who struggle with neurodiversity, this is a method that works quite well. So testing the waters, find something that works for you. Repetitive behavior and routines, that's absolutely fine as long as you know how to get yourself out of that. So for example, if you're working on something and it's a barrier, causing a barrier, coming up with strategies to move you forward. And often people think about lots of things they can do, but try and find one thing. Don't make it complex, don't overcomplicate it. Difficulty, if you've got a colleague or a student who's struggling to follow instructions, maybe they're struggling because it's being said to them verbally. Maybe they'd be better following a PowerPoint list, or maybe they're better if you send it to them in an email, or if you write it, or if you if you have a conversation with them face to face. Overstimulating, a huge one. If you're working in an office and there's telephones going off left, right, and centre, there's lots of different conversations in a large room. Have a chat. If you're studying, if it's your workplace, have a chat with somebody superior and say to them, like, I need a quiet space. Maybe consider asking and approaching that. Can I work from home? Is there a room I can work in? Find the best working environment for yourself, and don't be afraid to ask. Talking about neurodiversity is so important, and as we move forward, it's becoming a less taboo subject. And actually, in order to get the best out of yourself or your colleague who potentially is neurodiverse, you need to put these methods and strategies in place. Difficulty following instructions and organising, we've talked about. So let's have a look at some of these comments. Finding it hard to say you feel negative about yourself. How do you think you could get through the negativity talking about yourself? Do you know what I do? It sounds really silly. I do it with my children. Each morning, I'll talk to them about 3 positive things they're going to achieve today, 3 positive thoughts. And it really does help. It sounds really corny. Like, look in the mirror, say to yourself, I can do this. I've got this today, and I want to achieve this today. And make sure out of everything you achieve that one thing. And at the end of the day, you can be proud of yourself. Setting yourself goals that are unachievable won't help you. It will make you stressed. It will make you anxious. Just make sure that your colleague or yourself or whoever it is that is struggling with their condition, they have those methods and strategies in place. Okay, so let's have a look. Voluntary work. Doing voluntary work, what do you mean? As like a distraction? Tell me more about what your thoughts are around the voluntary work. Let's move on to the next slide. So, I moved on too quickly. I'm getting a bit click happy. So often people who struggle with neurodiversity, they actually have quite unique skills and talents. Does anybody have any idea what these unique talents may be? I'm going to start you off whilst I'm waiting for the chat box. That's what I was just going to talk about, actually. Super focused on task. Whilst you can struggle with following instructions, often people who are neurodiverse really are able to focus on a particular task. They're often very good at working through numbers. They're very creative. They're often very good at problem solving. If anybody's out there who is one of those people, it's quite incredible to watch somebody who is hyper focused and able to problem solve quite effectively. Creativity is a huge thing as well. But I think when you're looking at these signs and conditions and symptoms that I'm talking about today, I think they're really reflective of anybody, not just people who are potentially going through a diagnosis for a neurodiverse condition. Everybody has, different unique skills, talents, and things like that. But actually, it's just remembering that some people get to these in a different way. Health and safety, quite particular about health and safety. My eldest son, we used to call him Mr. Health and Safety because he used to be obsessed with it. So, and although he's not being diagnosed as neurodiverse in any aspect, it is, it could have been back then. It's kind of eased now, but it could have definitely been thought as a trait. Troubleshooting, absolutely, yeah. But don't you think, though, guys, that if we harness these skills and talents in the right way, they are just so they can be productive and innovative and just bring so much to the team. Everybody can bring something to the team. It's about finding out about each of your employees, your co-workers, your students, and finding out what you can, what makes them tick, what's going to get the best out of them. Because if you can get the best out of them, then they're going to offer the team the best, the team the best effort, and then you're going to move forward effectively. They're going to hit goals, you're going to hit targets, and they're going to feel valued. And I think that's really, really important. Consider panic attacks as neurodiversity. I don't, panic attacks wouldn't be classed as neurodiversity, but I guess they could be it could be, if you're struggling with neurodiversity, it could be something that, because you're struggling with anxiety, then you could suffer from panic attacks. Okay, so yeah, panic attacks they can, so from a health and well-being perspective, panic attacks can be due to stress or trauma. They can be due to, it's a really big topic, that talking about panic attacks and what they're due to. They could literally be caused by numerous things. So I'm going to move on from that. If you want to talk to me about panic attacks, I'll pop my email in the chat box, and we can talk to. We've got specialist counsellors, etc., that can talk to you about those kind of things. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Conscious of time. So, opening up the conversation, hold on, somebody's asked, what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is a term used to describe the different ways in which people's brains work. I hope that helps. That's kind of a simplified version of the dictionary version. So, opening up the conversation. If you know somebody who you think may or may not have neurodiversity, it's really important to listen. Don't make assumptions. Ask positive questions, and based on the strengths associated with neurodivergence. Be patient, speak clearly and openly, and don't be afraid of talking about neurodiversity. Please click on the button, poll button. Okay. Yeah, so I've only got one vote at the minute about, do you have any neurodivergent colleagues or students in your organisation? There's lots of polls going on there, guys. I'd really love you to get involved in those. It really helps us. We're currently doing a deep dive into neurodiversity in the workplace and leadership and management at the minute at the Better Health Generation. So we're really excited about that. Anyway, so opening up the conversation. Do you guys find it easy to talk about neurodiversity? Are you finding that in your workplace or in your learning environment, it is tricky to navigate and talk about, or do you feel that you feel accepted? Do you feel that your superiors support you in the right ways? What would you like from, what would you like more of? Do you feel comfortable talking to people? Especially when you're out from work, I get stressed out. What do you mean you get stressed out by being in work and managing the neurodiverse symptoms or signs and difficulties that you have? If you could expand, that would be great. It's really great that you guys are interacting with me today. It's really important for self-reflection. Right. So, accommodations and support. What can you do to support yourself, your colleagues, or people that you're working alongside? Short breaks. Focus on one job at a time. I've talked about this a few minutes ago. Give yourself achievable targets. Give your colleagues achievable targets. If you're a manager or you're in a leadership role and you know that somebody's struggling, you might know that they are neurodivergent. You might not know but suspect they are. Focus on giving them one task at a time. Make it achievable for them. Because the worst thing you can do, whether they're neurodivergent or not, is to overwhelm somebody and make them feel like they're not going to be able to get through the amount of work set. And also, you're just going to get more out of them. You'll get a better quality because they feel respected and valued. So you're much more likely to get more out of them. Set timers. I do this. I set out in my diary. I have literally I set timers for each each project I'm working on, so that I don't get distracted. I get very easily distracted. So for me, those timers really help bring me back on track. If you're in an office environment, use do not disturb signs when you're working on a project. Let the team know you need some quiet time, need some space. understanding those sensory issues, plan accordingly. If telephones are a distraction, if people talking are a distraction, put your phones on silent. Great to have mobile phones, so accessible. However, it is a huge distraction. So your working environment is something you really need to take into consideration. Relaxation, yoga, it can be relaxation like yoga. You can listen to music, read a book, whatever you need. Find out what makes you or your colleague tick, and helps them refocus and regain some control of what they're meant to be working on. A job which I enjoyed but was low spectrum. Okay, yeah, it was back in April, I believe it's okay. So, if you want to go back into that job, how can somebody support you into that job? Would you feel comfortable being open and talking to the HR team who are interviewing you, potentially going into an interview? Some people don't like online interviews. Don't be afraid to ask for a face-to-face. It's really important that we, I know it's easier said than done, but please, don't be afraid to ask for what's going to help you. If you don't understand any of the language, ask questions. It shows that you're willing to learn, and you know that you really want the job, and that should be taken into consideration. Move on. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. It's not moving me on. So, any questions from anybody? That was a really brief overview, yeah, please feel free to ask any questions. Let's have a look what's going on the polls over here.
If we have a look over the polls, that may give us some areas to
do you have any neurodivergent colleagues or students in your organisation? So we've got 11 votes and we've got 35 people online, 36 people online. Does anybody want to add to that before I have a little chat about it? Because I suspect it's actually quite a bit higher than that. I'll come back to it. If everybody could just look at the polls now and fill them in, that would be great. Do you feel neurodiversity working? You consider disability. Okay. Right, I'm going to go through them. Oh, we're still popping. Everybody's voting. Give you a couple of minutes just to quickly fill those in. And start talking about do you feel neurodiversity has caused problems while studying, at work, or with recruitment? Okay, so we've got 9 votes that say yes. Is that because you didn't feel comfortable asking for support? Is that because it's a taboo subject and we don't talk about it enough? Would you be open to talking about it more? Because I work with a lot of corporate companies, and at the minute I'm working with these companies with HR teams on how to recruit neurodiverse people who and how to make sure that they are interviewing them in the right way and offering varying ways of interviews. Like I say, face-to-face, online. Do they need voice recordings of the questions that are going to be asked? We talk to the HR leadership and management team about how to put strategies in place, processes in place. We work quite closely with the NHS on this as well at the minute, which is amazing because it really means that we're talking about it. It really means that if you are neurodiverse, you can go in to your studying environment, your work environment, or even into your interview and say, look, I am either diagnosed as neurodiverse. These are what my needs are. These are what my strengths are. Be confident, because it makes you no less able. In fact, it offers talents and for certain lines of work, you're going to be the innovative flair that business needs to drive them. So it's easier said than done, but I'd say hold your head high, own it, and learn what your strengths are, learn where you can really fly, because it's really important. This is turning into like some kind of TEDx talk. I'm sorry. Motivational speech. Do you feel having neurodiversity benefits your role? This is interesting. Honestly, this makes me so happy that we've got a higher percentage that have said yes. Can you pop in the chat box and tell me, these 9 people, why you think it has benefited your role, in the hope that the 30% of people that have voted no can get a little bit of inspiration and feel a little bit more positive. Let's have a look in the chat box quickly.
Lots of activity in the chat box. Hopefully you've got enough time to sort of read those anyway.
Enjoyed it. Let's go. I agree. It is massively understood. Is it a disability? I suppose it depends on who you speak to. For me, people that I've spoken to are neurodiverse that don't have strategies in place, don't feel supported. Yes, they feel it is a disability because they are really struggling to be understood, and their leaders and managers potentially are not getting the best out of them. And the more we talk about it, the more we're going to be able to do that. Fear of judgment. Yeah, fear of judgment. Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand that. Do you feel comfortable speaking to your line managers, your tutors? Do you feel comfortable talking to them about it? Open the conversation. Be that person. I agree. A lot of companies don't have the resources, and I'm working with companies at the minute who don't have the resources, but excitingly are starting to join us for CPD webinars and workshops in order to make sure they are supporting people who are neurodiverse, and because they have admitted that they have struggled to recruit into certain areas because they don't know how to manage people who struggle with neurodiversity. It shouldn't be a struggle. It should be a case of they're neurodiverse, this is what their needs are, let's implement this to make sure we get the best out of them. But it is slow. I 100% agree. It is slow, but the more we talk about it and the more webinars that are put on like this, the more people are going to understand it, and the more people are going to naturally put in strategies and pathways for people who, whose brains do operate in a different way. My last employer were very discriminatory to disabilities, but it did it in a way that you couldn't take them to ACAS. I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean, it shouldn't be the way. And the more we talk about it, the more people like that, hopefully will get on board. Makes clear communicator, makes me a clear. You're a clear communicator, which is great, which benefits team productivity. That's a real positive. Thank you so much for putting that in there. My condition of disability, our disability come under neurodiversity, and happy to explain. Did a one-to-one session with them about my condition. If you're happy to talk about it, that's great. Yet they're still discriminated. Do you think it's a lack of understanding? I personally feel that when I go into companies and talk about neurodiversity, often it is a lack of understanding and ignorance more than anything else. And it is all about education. Neurodiverse is, it's a term that we've adapted and used towards these conditions to kind of put them in like one area and kind of bulk them together, but they are all so different. I mean, you've seen the list on the I think it was slide number 4, 3 or 4, but you've seen all the different conditions there. I mean, they're so varied and offer different positives, and potentially, some of them are more difficult to navigate. But I do feel it's a lack of understanding, to be honest. Neurodiversity is such a huge term and covers such a huge area. I changed careers after 20 years as my employer was not supportive. I ended up having a breakdown. I have a great job and wish I'd left sooner. That's great. That's really positive. Thank you for putting that. So, if everybody, I don't know if everybody can see this, but I'm going to read it out because I think it's really important. I changed careers after 20 years. My employer was not supportive and I ended up having a breakdown. Now I've got a great job and wish I'd left sooner. But there are other roles out there and you just have to find where you need to be. That's amazing. It's really positive. You can look for disability confident employers. You can look online. They have had to prove themselves that they are supportive, and they're part of like an alliance. So I'd really recommend that if you are struggling and you're looking into different sectors or you're starting on your career, you're starting out, looking for disability confident employers is a real positive. Okay, let's have a quick whiz back to the polls. Do you consider your neurodiversity a disability? So 8 have said yes and 5 have said no. Do you feel, though, out of those 8 that have said yes, that if people were more informed, that you would feel it less of a disability and more of a positive? Obviously, it's quite varied because I don't know what your condition is and what you're struggling with. But just as an overview, do you consider, do you think if people were more aware? And were educated to understand neurodiversity, you would still feel it was a disability? Let's have a look. Thank you for sharing that.
That's quite right. That's what I'm here for. Don't worry.
Depends on the employer, as I said in my previous comments. Yeah,
I think what you hit the nail on the head with a lot of this, Emma, it is the awareness of the employers. Sometimes it's the stereotypes that they have in their head when they think of sort of potentially learning difficulties and disabilities, and that's sort of the mindset that people are in and not embracing of neurodiversity and looking at those benefits. I mean, I've got a number of colleagues here that will sometimes talk about them quite openly. Some of them don't necessarily, but it's from our point of view, it's understanding that actually these are very strong individuals. Sometimes having that sort of laser focus to detail, and it certainly benefits us at the same time. And I'm sure it's the same with some of the people who attend at here and also employers out there as well. But sometimes where you don't have the knowledge, whether it's from the manager or from the department itself, people can feel that they've been discriminated and mistreated and they don't enjoy the environment. So to hear that somebody's been in the environment for 20 years, but they felt they wasn't supported is bad, but then they've been able to move on to better things, and that's sometimes
amazing that they had the courage to move on, to be honest. It's incredible. I think the more we talk about it, the more webinars like this that take place. We are championing at the Better Health Generation neurodiversity and trying to get the message out there, which is why we're doing this deep dive as well. So it's and that's focused on managers, leadership, etc., to try and just navigate it and make sure people understand neurodiversity and are more inclusive. At the end of the day, there's so much talent out there. It just needs to be embraced. And if it means putting a different process in place, well, then you put a different process in place. Let's work together to make sure everybody, feels included and can achieve their very best and get to where they need to be and where they want to be. I will follow up if it's okay with you, Martin. With I've got a resource pack which is quite handy. So if you want to send it on to anybody, that's fine. But I will put my details in the chat box for anybody else who wants a conversation.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Emma. I mean, what we will do is we'll share the slides around. We'll also share the sections or the segments of the recordings around to everybody. But please do sort of continue to raise that awareness and to look into these things, especially if you consider yourself to be that neurodiverse individual. You can learn more about it yourself and also how you can educate people on what those conditions are as well, and really be that sort of catalyst for change as we move forward. I think the key part is that education and his awareness. I feel from my point of view, there are more conversations that happen around this. But again, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, just in terms of, some cases, the interview process, putting those different processes in place, an interview, typically somebody that is neurodiverse may not perform particularly well in an interview. So where you would normally go through your standard 10 whatever questions it may well be, they may not sort of thrive in that sort of
No.
environment. However, if you gave them a practical activity, they may be able to do it, 10 times quicker or faster and more efficient than somebody that's, that could, took themselves for England. But it is those sort of points, really. Emma, is there any sort of concluding anything that you want to say before we sort of move on through the session at all today?
No, just keep talking about it, keep opening up the conversations, don't be afraid. And those who are online who feel like it is a negative for them, let's keep talking about it, because it is a positive, and you offer incredible things to your education, your workplace, your family life. And you can achieve great things. Don't look at it as a barrier. Let's try and look at it as a positive. And I firmly believe that, as somebody who is probably neurodiverse myself, but has never been diagnosed, because I am quite high functioning. I'm a real advocate for, celebrating differences and looking for strengths in everybody, and positives. So, thank you so much for listening. And I really hope you've got something from today's session.
I certainly have, and I do thank you for sort of sharing that with us. I know we've got some of our team members on here as well, and it helps us as an organisation to raise that awareness and for them to have that better understanding as well. And I do think we're sort of thinking yourself, sort of including being that neurodiverse, I think everybody is to a certain extent.
Yeah,
it's just some will have it in different situations or sort of in those circumstances anyway. But no, I really do appreciate you sort of coming on and really raising our awareness. Thank you very much, Emma. And we'll bring you back on at the end where we sort of conclude out. But please, if anybody does want to continue asking questions about neurodiversity, please continue. The polls will continue to be open as well. Please do share your thoughts on there as well. But thank you very much, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on through the session this morning, we've talked about neurodiversity, and there'll be another topic that we sort of come back to in just a moment. But I would like to bring Becky onto stage now. So Becky is from an organisation called Glow, which is part of that Honeycomb group. Glow themselves are that sort of catalyst for change within the community. Focusing on those sort of areas of domestic abuse is that key part. And it's something that I've been well aware of, and probably many of us as well, in terms of sort of domestic abuse. And it's something that, again, is one of those things that we need to raise the awareness of, because of how common actually this is. The statistics, and I'm sure Becky will sort of cover some of those, it is continually sort of growing. It becomes to the point where we need to raise that awareness. We need to look at educating individuals on what that healthy relationship looks like from a young age as well. And there's a number of different initiatives that are taking place. But Becky, welcome to the Empowering Through Awareness. Over to yourself. Oh, hang on, I've got you on mute at the moment. So to share your slides, if you go down to the bottom right, there we go. Yeah, down to the bottom right, share something, and you should see your slides in there for you.
Choose myself, show. Yay. Okay.
There we go. Over to yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me here today. Emma, that was fantastic and quite a hard act to follow, actually. I've called this Domestic Abuse a whistle-stop tour because we deliver training on domestic abuse awareness, the basic awareness, and it's normally 3.5 hours. So we've got half an hour. So I've just tried to sort of grasp the most sort of pertinent bits, but it's by no means a deep delve into it. So I'm Becky Federoff, and I work for Glow. I've worked in domestic abuse since about 2005, actually, for a long time now, in different roles. I've worked within refuge. I have worked as a housing advocate, supporting victim survivors who have housing issues as a result of domestic abuse. I've delivered training, worked in the community. So yeah, supported hundreds and hundreds of survivors over the years. So I got connected with Pathway because Pathway in Burslem, some of wonderful students have provided some pamper sessions to our recovery hub customers. So some of the women within our service, and it's been fabulous. So I got roped into this. Cheers, Martin. Glow, as you mentioned, is part of the Honeycomb Group, the wider Honeycomb Group. We also have a homelessness service named Concrete. We've got staff's housing, and we've got Revival, which is a service that aims to keep people in their homes. Okay. Oh, where's the next one? So Glow's got a really hefty, ambitious mission. We've got this full circle approach, and our mission is to address, overcome, and actually end domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a public health issue, as Martin had mentioned. You know, it's so prevalent. Every one of us in here have probably been affected in one way or another by domestic abuse. If not personally, then we will know somebody who has been in an abusive relationship, or it may have been family members. Police receive a call about domestic abuse every 30 seconds across England and Wales. Someone's struggling with sound. Am I quite clear to everyone else?
I think it's just more internet. I think carry on, Becky. Don't worry.
Okay. So yeah, police receive a call every 30 seconds regarding domestic abuse, but we also know that it's a massively underreported crime. Okay. So a bit about Glow then. I've sort of colour coded it. So by addressing domestic abuse, we are commissioned to provide safe accommodation to domestic abuse survivors throughout North Staffordshire. We have 3 refuges, and we've also got lots of community properties as well. And within safe accommodation, victim survivors will have their own support worker to. So we're based. So if someone's just put on the chat, please do put in the chat. That's fabulous. That Birmingham City have just released their latest strategy for domestic abuse. We're actually based in Staffordshire and Derbyshire, so that's fabulous that they have, and it is on the agenda for most sort of authorities as well. As a result of the Domestic Abuse Act, there's been further funding, so on and so forth. So it is sort of up there on the agenda. So we've also got a housing advocate. I explained that was a role I was in previously. So she supports, works very closely with local councils, local housing advice. If someone's experiencing domestic abuse, then they should be treated as a priority through local housing teams. So she advocates on behalf. We have children and young persons support in refuge. Sometimes in some of our refuges, we have up to 30 children at a time, and those children may have been moved. Well, most frequently they've moved out of area, they're having to start a new school, make new friends, all the rest of it. So we do provide that support to children as well, to try and make that transition as painless and unscary as possible. We have the sanctuary service, so we can support with people who want to stay within their own homes, with lock changes, CCTV, that sort of thing. Derbyshire IDVA service. So we have the IDVA service in Derby. I don't know if anyone's aware of what an IDVA stands. If I throw out acronyms at you, tell me, and I will explain them. So an IDVA is an independent domestic violence advisor, and they work with the most high-risk victims of domestic abuse, those at risk of high harm or of fabulous, thanks Martin, of high harm or even sort of homicide. The Derbyshire, they represent victims at MARAC as well, which is a multi-agency risk assessment conference where all agencies get together to put safety plans in place. for victim survivors. And we've got lots of specialist IDVAs. So, for example, we've got a BME IDVA, a health IDVA who works in the hospitals for anybody's that is there experiencing abuse, and they'll get that specialist support put in. We've got court IDVAs for criminal courts, and also family court IDVAs as well. So we've also got young persons violence advisors. So they're like an IDVA, but for young people as well. So they're really specialist and trained in that. And then, so in addressing overcoming, the Recovery Hub is my service, which I sort of manage. I'm really proud to manage. And we support female survivors of domestic abuse. So we deliver programs such as the Freedom Programme, which sort of addresses what it can be so confusing for people who've experienced abuse to understand what has gone on, why it happened. There's lots of self-blame. So the Freedom Programme's a 12-week programme. It's fabulous. It sort of unpicks that and puts the blame firmly where it belongs. And we do the Recovery Toolkit as well, another 12-week programme, looking at moving on after domestic abuse. And these programs are accredited to level 2 with AIM as well. And we do lots of social and wellbeing stuff as well. So Emma had mentioned, yoga being really good for sort of calming the mind and for wellbeing. So we have weekly yoga sessions, which I love. We have meditation sessions, we have workshops. Okay, and then so to overcome domestic abuse, this full circle approach, we've got the 180 project in Derby, and they work with high risk perpetrators, and it aims to reduce the number of child and adult victims by challenging attitudes and behaviours. So it's getting to the crux of it, really. If we look at statistics over the last 30 years, they've not changed. 2 women a week are still being killed in England and Wales by a current or ex-partner. 12 men a year are being killed by a partner, which is generally sort of same-sex relationships, the majority of those. But those numbers haven't changed. And like Martin says, if anything, it's sort of getting worse, I think, with the internet, I think, and young people particularly learning about sort of sex for the first time through porn, sort of normalizing sort of strangulation and so yeah, it's getting worse. And young people between the ages of 16 and 25 are the demographic most at risk of domestic abuse, which is shocking. It's like it's not sort of, it's with those young people. Okay. We also go into the ISS project supports any partners or previous partners of the those responsible for the abuse who are being supported through the 180 project. We also have education programs. We go out into schools and teach young people from primary to college age about healthy relationships. So it's getting in there early and sort of teaching them in an age appropriate manner about what's healthy and what's not. And there's awareness raising as well, which is what I'm doing with you now. Okay. So what is domestic abuse? The Domestic Abuse Act, which finally got through Parliament in 2021, has given the first statutory definition of domestic abuse. So can you put in the chat just whatever sort of comes into your head? What is domestic abuse? What forms does it take? Anybody? Are you there? Is anybody there? Yeah. Thanks, Iveta. So yeah, verbal, emotional, physical, absolutely. Mental abuse, financial. Yeah. Fab. Emotional abuse. Yeah. And do you know what, Cynthia? You've put emotional abuse there. And out of all the sort of people I've worked with over the years, they will tell me that the emotional abuse and the mind games and the verbal abuse that they're harder to deal with than the physical abuse. It's long lasting, sort of the effects of that. So yeah, absolutely. So the statutory definition has said that any behaviour that is physically abusive, sexually abusive, violent or threatening, controlling or coercive, economically abusive, psychological or emotionally abusive is domestic abuse. And for it to be domestic abuse, the people involved have got to be over 16 and personally connected. So that may be a family member, adult family members. The majority is intimate partners, or ex-intimate partners. So that's sort of the definition. I think coercive control, that's sort of a fairly new term, and I'm not sure that everybody sort of understands it. So the definition is that it's an act or a pattern of acts of assault, threats, humiliation, and intimidation or other abuse that's used to harm, punish, or frighten their victim. And since 2005, that's been punishable by 5 years in prison. So, but if coercive control that doesn't involve sort of physical abuse can be sort of harder to prove. So Arenas has put in there, in the UK, has one of the highest literacy rates. What do you see as the root causes of domestic abuse? How do factors such as education, socioeconomic status, cultural norms, and mental health contribute to this issue? That's a brilliant question, and it's one that I'll cover shortly. What I would say is that, you know, socioeconomic can happen to, do you know what, I'm going to leave it there because we are going to cover it, because you sort of, that's the rest of the presentation, Aridas, but that's absolutely brilliant. So economic abuse has been sort of put as a part of the statutory definition now. So before we might say financial abuse, and this is something that, you know, you think about, maybe your partner taking your money or controlling your bank card, but it's a form of domestic abuse that involves controlling money and finances, as well as the things that money can buy. So it can limit one's freedom, safety, and economic stability, and often occurs along other types of abuse. And it's the same for all of these. It could be one type of abuse that is being used, but more often than not, it's going to be a mixture or all of them. I attended some training with Surviving Economic Abuse. They're a brilliant service. And the trainer used the analogy of a handbag to sort of define economic abuse. So the things you would carry, like your phone, your car keys, your lipstick, you know, your sanitary stuff that you need. So if this was all taken and held away from you, that's going to stop you from being able to leave the house, contact work, say you're not going, contact your friends. So they can all come under the umbrella of economic abuse there. Okay, a big one now, and I think it's going to be something Martin sort of covers when you're talking about the, what did you call it, sextology?
No, sex extortion, essentially, or sextortion. Yeah.
Right, sex extortion. So yeah, that's also been recognised in the Domestic Abuse Act, that the sending of intimate images, or even threatening to send intimate images, is now a crime under the Domestic Abuse Act. And we see it a lot. So we'll see women who have had spyware installed on their devices. They can't understand why their ex-partner, who they've not spoken to, knows where they're going, who they're seeing, what they're accessing on the internet, who they've spoken to. You know, we've got Ring doorbells now, which can be used as a form of control, you know, who's coming in and who's going out, cameras within the house, creating fake accounts to abuse and harass victims or impersonating them, stalking and controlling victims via location apps and geolocation on social media. So yeah, it just goes on and on, really. And I thought it might be quite sort of relevant to sort of any young people as well. I'm dead old now, I'm 48, so it's sort of all a bit above my head. But, you know, I think this is, again, we talked about young people being the highest demographic experiencing domestic abuse. And I think this has got quite a lot to do with that. So who does domestic abuse affect then? Who do we think it affects? Talk to me, pop it in the chat. Partners, children, family, the whole family, absolutely, the whole family. Everyone, yeah, Emma. Basically, that's the answer in short. It is everyone. So, women, domestic abuse is primarily a gendered crime. So, the majority of victims are going to be women. The majority of perpetrators are men, but we recognise it happens to everybody. With women, generally there's a higher level of harm and fear and repeated incidents than with male victims. 1 in 4 women report experiencing domestic abuse in their lifetimes. We estimate, 2 women are killed a week in England and Wales, but we also estimate that more than 10 women a week will take their own lives as a result of domestic abuse, and we've seen that within our own service as well. For women, pregnancy is a particularly high risk time as well. 30% of women will first be abused during pregnancy. If there's already abuse within that relationship, that it escalates massively. So it affects men. 1 in 7 men will report domestic abuse in their lifetime. This is often in the same sex relationships. And as I said, 12 men a year are killed by usually a current partner. Children, the Domestic Abuse Act now recognises children as victims in their own right for the first time. So if they're living in a household with domestic abuse, they're considered a victim in their own right, whether or not they witness that, we estimate that 90% of children are believed to be in the same or next room when domestic abuse is taking place, so they can get caught up in that. Pets are frequently targeted by perpetrators. It's one of the reasons why victims often feel they can't leave home, they can't leave the pets with that perpetrator. We hear of pets being killed. Neighbours are frequently, some of the first people to know about it. Friends, family, colleagues. So everybody is affected by it. Okay. Any questions so far? Is everyone okay? I know it's really, really an emotive subject, so I hope it's not too full bore for you. When Haridus, you'd mentioned about I will go back to that because right. I'll come back to that again because I'm not quite there yet. I'm sorry. So red flags. How do we recognise it? So abusive relationships tend to start really, really quickly. There's love bombing. Yeah, I've seen that. It is really good. I saw him speaking on a Mankind sort of conference as well, and it was really interesting. So yeah, abusive relationships tend to move really quickly, and it can be known as love bombing. So somebody might move in within 2 weeks of knowing. You might have a ring on your finger within 3 weeks. It's full bore. If your partner wants you all to themselves and stops you seeing family and friends, that's a warning sign. And it could be a warning sign for colleagues or friends or family. If somebody you used to seeing, they're in a new relationship and you're not seeing them anymore. But it's difficult because, when you're in the first throes of a relationship, quite frequently, you want to spend all your time with that person and, to the detriment of everyone else. But it's when it becomes that you're not allowed to see anyone else and you're becoming completely isolated. So if you're insulted, put down or unkind comments, and this is something we might observe as well, we might look and say, well, that doesn't seem quite right. Another way, I think, a good way to identify and spot the signs of a friend is if their phone is going constantly, from the partners, or texts on a night out, constant. That's always a bit of a red flag there. If they try to make you do things that don't feel right, won't take no for an answer, or use emotional blackmail, they always want to know where you are. And if you feel frightened around your partner, like you're walking on eggshells all the time, that's a phrase that women we work with use all the time, sort of walking on eggshells. So if they gaslight you, Martin, I told you the one about gaslighting, didn't I?
I don't think you have, no.
Well, I did. I told you in the green room earlier about gaslighting. No, I didn't, Martin. I didn't. But that's an example of someone gaslighting someone else, and I could have pushed that point and gone, yeah, I did. So it's making you feel like the things you've experienced aren't real, or making you question your sanity. Okay, just you just been gaslit. Well, I did it, didn't I? I gaslit him.
I didn't go on though. I was thinking, hang on, what do you mean?
I thought you might just go yes, just to make me not look stupid, but I'm glad you didn't. Another sign for me, a red flag for me, is when somebody speaks badly of previous partners. If they tell you that their ex was like a mad cow, or or if they've got children and they're not able to see those children, and there's a sort of story around she won't let me, that always makes me just go, oh dear, okay, there's sort of probably more to that. Okay, so gaslighting sounds like you need help, you're imagining things. There you go again. I was only joking. Well, if it makes you feel awful, and it's the impact of that, isn't it? So these are all sort of examples. No one's going to believe that. Start feeling sorry for yourself, and so on and so forth. One of the things you can do if you're worried that your partner might be abusive, or an ex-partner, or also like the partner of a friend or a colleague or anybody, you've and this was put on a statutory footing under the Domestic Abuse Act as well. So Clare's Law gives you the right to ask the police if your partner's a history of domestic abuse. And this law was named after Claire Wood. She was killed by her ex-boyfriend in 2009, and her family relentlessly campaigned because they'd said, had she been aware of his history, he'd been in prison for previous abuse in previous relationships, she wouldn't have touched him with a barge pole. So if there's any sort of suspicion there, and if the police feel that there's information that could protect you, they will tell you that. Okay. So going back to that question then, what causes domestic abuse? Why does domestic abuse happen? Okay, so what do you reckon? So we've got, they all came up at once. Well, we'll just go through it. We're going out of time anyway, aren't we? So reasons that might be given is drugs, alcohol, anger issues, it's learned behaviour, experienced domestic abuse as a child themselves, the football team lost, poor mental health, peer pressure, jealousy, stress, insecurity. Okay, so our stance at Glow, and lots of research and thinking around this, is that these are all excuses. They're excuses used by the abusive person, and the victim may share these beliefs as well, and society may share these beliefs. So all of these things, I can't remember who asked that brilliant question. All of these things can increase the risk of domestic abuse, of it happening, but they're not the reason. So domestic abuse happens because one person wants power and control over another person. Okay, the myths and misconceptions around this can impact on victims' survivors' perception of their experiences and stop them seeking help. I'd say, can everyone still hear me? Martin's disappeared there. Can you just put in the chat if you can still hear me when I'm talking to myself? Okay, fabulous. Okay. So there's mention of socioeconomic status there. There was last year in Stoke, the streets 2 streets away from me. Thank you. Sorry, I can't do much about it breaking up. I'm sorry. 2 streets away from me, a woman her house was set alight by her ex-partner, and she died. And that same week was the week where there's a head teacher in Surrey, I think, who was killed by a partner, and he killed himself and their child as well. So that sort of, what retrain women to get out of this? Most of them are finished on those sides, if I'm not wrong. Then why? What retrain women to get out of this? Most of them are fashion, no societal pressure. So actually, again, Harry asked, we can look at that. We can look quickly at the power and control wheel. So why is it so difficult to leave an abusive relationship? So this was a wheel developed in Canada. It's the Duluth model. It's a Duluth model that was founded when working with women, and all these different means were used to sort of control them by their partners. This is a photo taken in London by a policeman of a domestic incident, And it's just a depiction of why physical violence may never happen, but there's knives down that staircase. This is just in a normal house in London, and this is the scene they came across. Why don't people just leave? Why do women tolerate it? Well, leaving is the most dangerous time for a woman. It's the first month after leaving is when she's most likely to get seriously harmed or killed. They might blame themselves. They may not realise it's domestic abuse. They may still love the partner. There may be religious, cultural, language barriers. Pets, we mentioned that. Nowhere to go. Housing is a massive reason that people don't leave. 2/3 of refuge referrals are turned down, and there's a housing crisis both in the private sector and in the local authority. I think my time's about up, isn't it, Martin? Shall I
just sort of conclude? Don't worry too much about it. Don't worry.
Okay. So this is, we share the slides anyway. So this is how victim survivors may behave. So you can read through that at your own sort of leisure. The impacts on health are massive. The women we see, they sometimes come to us 10 years after a relationship has ended, and they still can't move on from it because that emotional impact is so massive. Okay. Practical impacts, they might have to leave their job, education, legal proceedings, and it affects ability to reach full potential, which I know Pathway is all about, isn't it? And like I said, post-separation abuse, also recognised in the Domestic Abuse Act. And one of the reasons is leaving is the most dangerous time. And post-separation abuse will frequently carry on once that relationship is over. So these are ways to support survivors. More than anything, believe them. Believe what they're saying to you. Don't question them. Avoid guilting. Don't be asking why they didn't leave before. Empathize, don't sympathize. Don't say how that feels. We don't know how that feels. Every situation is different. Don't minimize and excuse. They'll have been doing that for years. And try not to judge. Reassure, and acknowledge strengths. Every woman I've ever worked with, I am amazed at the strength that has taken them to live through that experience and still be standing. And also just recognize that the victims as experts in their own situation. So don't tell them what they should do. Ask them what they need to happen. And these are some resources here. So there's a HollyGuard app that you can upload to your phone or download. I'm not sure which one it is, or the Bright Sky app. So these are both apps. The HollyGuard app was sort of created. Holly was a young woman who was killed by her ex-partner, and her family sort of they campaign now, and they devised this app. So you can store pictures on there, you can record silently, it's got a stealth alert. And actually last year somebody was convicted with evidence from a HollyGuard app. It was recorded, and the incident was on this phone. Bright Sky app, that is disguised as a weather app. And we've got some numbers there because it's every, you're all over the shop. I've put sort of national helpline numbers. Was that on TV, Bonnie? It's so sad. She was a beautiful girl, wasn't she? And, and this is why, these are the worst case scenarios that, it's going to end up like that. But actually, it does happen. It does happen. And fear about leaving and what might happen is the reason many people stay. And you said about being sort of financially independent earlier. Lots of, so many victims are financially controlled, and they haven't got the resources to leave. Any questions? That really was dead quick. A whistle stop tour could go on for hours.
I really do appreciate your time, Becky, for being able to take us through these. And if anybody does have questions, please feel free to drop them in there, Becky. You can drop these contact details, or I'll drop them in the chat for anybody so they can reach out for that advice and support. It is really, very much raising the awareness of these support services out there for people, even if it's just to have a conversation. It may be that you've got a concern about your own partner, or it could be a friend of a friend, and you're looking for that advice and support. It is very much just being able to find that information. The apps are a fantastic idea. of being able to sort of record that information, but also for people to find out that, you know, really that they're not alone, as we've sort of alluded to. You know, this is something that's constantly growing. We looked earlier at sort of the excuses that people use, and you know, that's the reasoning and their fuel behind it. But really, with those that sort of toxicity that we have, it just continues to grow and grow. But what we need to do is to raise an awareness, and people understand that actually there is help and support out there, and they won't be judged as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. So just really quickly, the women in our service, it's being amongst other women. That's where the power lies and the empowerment lies, is being amongst other people who understand and get it, because, you know, more people than you think do.
Yeah, really do appreciate it. So please do continue to put any questions in the chat. Becky's also put her email in there. Please do reach out to her. You've also got the Honeycomb website and the telephone number on the screen. We will be sharing all this out on the emails over the sort of coming days as well. And these are services there that, you know, just to raise your awareness, and, you know, you may need them at some point. We never know. Okay. Thank you very much, Becky. Really do appreciate, and hopefully, I know you've been into the Bursum Centre to support there. We hope to sort of continue on with that relationship and look at how we can really raise that awareness, even, you know, into further areas as well, just like what we're doing today, but maybe more sort of specifically on that, and spending longer on it as well. So really do appreciate your support today and being able to share this with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. So moving through the session today, I'm now going to bring or just a bit of a change of pace in terms of what we're talking about. So just going to ask my colleague Jack to sort of come on board and give us a bit of an update in terms of you know, what we've been doing on sort of the multicultural front, really. So Jack, over to yourself.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Martin. Some really fabulous presentations so far. So I hope I can just sort of do that justice, really. But I'd like to just talk about our work at the Pathway Group around sort of multiculturalism and how we promote social mobility, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Again, very, very important topics, very important subjects that we really look to try and promote within the organisation. Just a quick introduction. My name is Jagdeep Saura. I'm Executive Director at the Pathway Group, but specifically looking after our multicultural initiatives, which I'll talk through now. So the first one being the Multicultural Apprenticeship and Skills Alliance, which is it's a membership organisation, a variety of independent training providers, corporate employers, private sector, public sector employers, HE, FE, so higher education, further education institutions, and individuals and organisations that are really involved within sort of the skills and apprenticeships agenda. So why was this set up? It's set up really to improve the diversity and inclusivity of organisations who want more individuals from the multicultural spectrum, really, within their organisation. But it was also looking at sort of that equity of opportunity. So how do you provide marginalised groups and underrepresented groups that equity of opportunity? But those who have that opportunity, how can they get access to that opportunity as well? So sort of two-pronged approach, really. It was set up in 2017 as the BAME Apprenticeship Alliance. And then it rebranded back in sort of June, July 2022, just before I'd started, to the Multicultural Apprenticeship Alliance. So we phased out the terminology BAME and brought in the multicultural Multicultural Apprenticeship Alliance. So it's formulated on three pillars. So first one of those is around education. So we work a lot around education. So how do we educate what we call our patrons, who are our members? How do we educate employers? How do we educate the key stakeholders within the multicultural community? So those being the parents, the carers, the potential aspiring multicultural apprentice. How do we educate them about what apprenticeships really are? Second is around engagement. So we use a number of sort of engagement techniques and strategies, such as conferences and things such as that, seminars, webinars such as this one, in terms of how do in terms to really our objective being to engage with these communities. But also we work with our patrons to work with them to really embed themselves within the community and formulate an effective engagement strategy. And our third pillar is advocacy and policy. So how can we use data, evidence, lived experience? We deliver a sort of number of test and learn pilots that we evaluate, and our objective for that is to influence local, regional, national policy. So what we represent, so we do have a vision and a mission. So our vision is to be the leading company or the leading alliance for improving opportunities for people from these groups to have access to employment, equitable employment, and equitable training and skills as well. And we probably are the leading organisation within that. And our mission is to engage with 10,000 people from underrepresented communities by the end of 2024. Now, as you'll see, as I go further into the presentation, we've probably tripled that by the end of 2024 because we get invited to a lot of webinars, seminars, conferences, but also our other initiatives and events really enable us to engage with a number of people and promote the work that we do. So these are just some of the organisations who we work with. So these are patrons. As you can see, it's a variety of organisations from a variety of sectors, some extremely large organisations and some local organisations, but from a variety of sort of sectors, as I say, and a variety of sort of fields. So, you know, you've got your further education and higher education organisations there. You've got your corporate employers, you've got your independent training providers, and you can see sort of the types of industries that we're working alongside and are making the impact that we currently have. And the other thing we have is what we call our strategic partners and advocates. So these are organisations that we work very closely with, and they really help support our advocacy and policy pillar. So, for example, Learning and Work Institute, or our policy and strategic partner. We have organisations such as Youth Employment UK, who are probably the most prevalent youth employment type of organisation, who we work with very, very closely around that sort of agenda and that field. We have the Ladder Foundation, again, a 10-year-old organisation, a national organisation that supports individuals into apprenticeships. These are a couple of testimonials from our patrons that just really help support the work that we do, and they're sort of testament to the work that we do as well. In addition to the Multicultural Apprenticeship and Skills Alliance, I mentioned we also run a number of events. So the first one of those being the Multicultural Apprenticeship Awards, which are probably the largest apprenticeship awards nationally. Last year, just an example of that, last year I think we had over 750 attendees, 400 nominations and over 40 awards. So they're extremely successful, extremely well attended. However, our main point and our main objective for the Multicultural Apprenticeship Awards are really celebrating talent and diversity in apprenticeships, and that's what these awards do. In addition to that, we have the Festival Apprenticeship, which are 3 events that we hold. One at the Oval in London, one at Manchester Met Uni in Manchester, and one at Millennium Point in Birmingham. I think the one in Manchester we're still running, so I think that's on the 12th of July at Manchester Met. So anybody interested in coming along, please attend. It's free to attend. We have over 80 employers there. We also have sort of a stage where we deliver a number of seminars, workshops. Apprentices talk about their lived experience in apprenticeships. So again, sort of first-hand insight really into the world of apprenticeships. And effectively, we're trying to sort of create impactful and engaging events that promote, celebrate talent, apprenticeships, learning, development, diversity, inclusion, and social mobility. Sorry, it's the 2nd of July. Thank you, Brad. And then in addition to sort of all our work, we also want to launch a platform really for our multicultural apprentices, so they have an opportunity where they can connect, they can collaborate, and they can thrive. So we're launching the Multicultural Apprentice Network. As I say, it's a forum and a platform for apprentices to really network with each other, share that best practice, but also for our Multicultural Apprenticeship and Skills Alliance patrons to have direct access to these individuals as well. So they'd have direct access to that lived experience. And again, we're launching that very, very shortly as well. So if there are any aspiring apprentices on this webinar or looking to become an apprentice, we can send you the link for the Multicultural Apprentice Network as well. And then last but by no means least, we're actually launching or holding, our first conference, or our inaugural conference called Amplify. It's the Apprenticeship Branding Conference that's taking place on Tuesday, the 11th of June at Millennium Point. It's going to be a sort of solution-focused conference where we have a number of organizations. We're hoping to have sort of 300 people attend, between 250 and 300. All the sort of the who's who really within the apprenticeship and skills sector will be there. We have a number of sort of panel sessions. We also have a keynote speaker, a guy by the name of Derek Redmond, who some of you may or may not have heard of, but he's the guy who hit the 1992 Olympics of Barcelona, 400-meter runner. He pulled his hamstring or tore his hamstring, and his father came from the crowd and walked him around. So he was a world-class athlete. And now he's actually become a world-renowned keynote speaker as well. And he's very impactful in terms of what he says, and there's going to be a lot of takeaways from this conference as well. So really, really excited about this. It's on the 11th of June. All the details we can put in the chat as well. So if anybody's interested in attending or finding out more, please attend this. We would really welcome that. And these are just a few case studies from our sort of multicultural apprentices, award-winning multicultural apprentices. And we're sharing the slides anyway, aren't we, Martin?
We will share the brand, and obviously we will be promoting the events and initiatives to those of us today. We'll receive copies of our new chapter as well.
And anybody sort of interested in sort of becoming a patron or finding out more, we also just have these badges.
Unfortunately, I don't have mine on me today, Jack, so I can't model it for you.
So we have these sort of multicultural badges here with the M. I've got mine on here somewhere. There you go. So again, we're sort of encouraging individuals and organizations who are involved with us to sort of wear their M badge with pride, really. But thank you very much. I'm sort of hanging around if anybody's got any sort of questions or whatever, but hopefully that will give you a bit more insight in terms of our work within the multicultural community.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. And it is just to sort of highlight the other initiatives that we have within Pathway Group. And no, Joe, thank you very much for sort of taking us through that and sharing some of those case studies and also the organisations we're working with. Thank you.
Welcome.
So moving through, I'm conscious of time because we are restricted to 2 hour slots. So I'm going to not to worry about so much my section in terms of what I'm covering, but don't worry, I will do a recording and I will ensure this is shared around to everybody. I would like now to bring onto the stage a lady who I met at the Inspirational Youth Awards just back in April. The Inspirational Youth Awards is all about celebrating those really young people, organisations. We as an organisation, we had with our sort of initiatives, our involvement, we had sponsored a category which is the Inclusivity Award. A colleague of mine, Kasim Chowdhury, was part of the sort of judging committee at the time. And you know what we did at the time is we spoke to the award winner, but really the award was all about recognising those individuals that promote culture and inclusivity within their community, really demonstrating that commitment and that tireless dedication for it, really. And on that note, I would like to bring down onto the stage with myself as well is Evita. She's also known as the Happy Autistic Lady, where she's the CEO. It's a family-run business that she's established. The organisation themselves are committed to empowering and engaging neuro-inclusive students and workspaces. I know we've had a couple of conversations already and hopefully it's something that we look to sort of embrace more ourselves. As I've mentioned, we have a number of our colleagues on today, and really these are around raising the awareness of topics like domestic abuse, but also neurodiversity at the same time as well. Evita is here to continue to raise that awareness, talk about some of her shared experiences, being that mentor for those aspiring neurodiverse and entrepreneurs at the same time. And Evita, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to meet everyone here on the webinar. I'll share my slides. Fabulous. Okay, so today we'll be talking about neurodiversity awareness, and I'll slightly touch on or add on to what Emma talked about, and about what we do and how neurodiversity can specifically help organisations achieve, high productivity, improved retention, more employee satisfaction, and so on. So, yes. Oh, sorry, Martin, how do I? Oh, there we go. It's reacting now. So to briefly introduce myself and who I am, I'm Iveta, as Martin mentioned, and I myself am neurodivergent. So if you have any questions for someone with lived experience and expertise within the field, please do feel free to ask in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer. And to give a background of how we started, 4 years ago, my sister Vera was diagnosed autistic. And since then, we have been on a mission to raise awareness about neurodiversity. And we originally started as a e-commerce brand selling self-advocacy badges to individuals, but also to schools. And we slowly realised that students and staff members feel fundamentally unsupported and misunderstood, and that in reality, it's not just impacting us as neurodivergent individuals, but that it also impacts businesses and schools. And I'll go on later specifically how it affects you as well. So now, essentially, we also offer training and consultancy to improve brand reputation, retention, productivity, and employee and student satisfaction. And of course, also ensure that organisations complying with the Disability and the Equality Acts and the soon-to-be imposed neurodiversity screening bill at schools. But then from that, we also additionally learned that even when management understands neurodiversity or has practices in place, that the community, with the workplace and the students, still don't feel comfortable enough to talk about it because there's not that community around it. There's, we haven't normalised talking about neurodiversity. And so at Happy Autistic Lady, what we additionally do is that we're able to address the entire workforce and the entire student population with campaigns that include public speaking, workshops, marketing content, and inclusive branded merchandise, because anyone can slap your logo on a t-shirt, but we add a very creative and inclusive spin to it. So, more about neurodiversity and how it actually impacts you. Emma already talked through this, but to give a very quick recap, neurodiversity, it's different in how people's brains work, in our behaviour, in our thought process and understanding. Now, what's really important here to note is that actually quite often people forget about the term neurodivergent and they misuse the term neurodiversity. So neurodiversity actually is a way to describe the whole population. There we go. It's kind of similar to biodiversity. However, when you're describing one particular individual, for example, myself, then I am neurodivergent. We as a community and a society are neurodiverse together. And so neurodiversity consists of people who are neurodivergent and people who are neurotypical. And people who are neurotypical are seen as kind of stereotypically conforming to the norm, versus people who are neurodivergent may be, for example, autistic, have ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's, OCD, and so on. A few traits that can come with these types of neurodivergencies vary depending on what type of neurodivergence you have. And this list is not, the full list. For every person, it's also very different. What's really important to note as well is that neurodivergence, it's a human experience. And so, many of us, no matter if we're neurodivergent or neurotypical, might, for example, be quite spontaneous, or when we're nervous, we might all fidget. I'm so sure at some point everyone here has sat at a meeting at a table and suddenly you notice that your knees going up and down, maybe from nervousness or from stress, and that can be seen as fidgeting or stimming, repetitive behavior. So neurodivergence is a human experience. However, people who are neurodivergent, they have these specific traits to different extents than a neurotypical person and in different combinations. So, also really important to talk about is the difference between social and medical model of disability. So Emma previously talked about neurodiversity. However, you might see me using different language and talking about it slightly differently. That's because there's two key ways that we talk about disability and neurodiversity, and that's the social versus the medical way. Now, the social model of disability is kind of what's preferred by people who are neurodivergent and disabled themselves, because it focuses rather on societal barriers that create the disability. It sees disability as something that is neutral. It neither has to be something positive nor negative. It's just a different way of existing. It's different, but it's not less. The medical model of disability, on the other hand, sees the individual's struggles as the consequence of their disability. For me, for example, talking about my personal experiences, I have quite intense sensory sensitivities. So right now, for example, I'm sitting in a room and I have the lights off. If the lights were on, I would most likely go into sensory overload, maybe have a migraine, struggle to get out of bed the next day. But is it the space that is disabling me, or is it my neurodivergence? Well, if I am able to implement an accommodation by turning the lights off, I no longer have this problem. And so that's looking at it from the perspective of the social disability model. So why does neurodiversity actually matter? Generally, neurodiversity matters because we need it. It's kind of similar, I like to compare it to biodiversity. Biodiversity is, in nature, we have different plants. Very simple as that. In society, as humans, we have different ways of thinking. And that diversity gives us new ideas, it gives us new perspectives of looking at things, which can be a massive advantage to organizations. On top of that, being inclusive benefits us all. For example, I'm a direct communicator. Before Emma was asking, what are some of the benefits or strengths you see by being neurodivergent? For me, I see the fact that I am a literal thinker and I'm a direct communicator. And if someone's a direct communicator in your team, that probably will streamline processes, right? It will make communication much easier. And so in that sense, understanding people's different communication styles will benefit us all. And then on top of that, 15% of the UK's population has an invisible disability, which includes neurodivergence. Now, there's some polls on the side. There was a previous similar poll asking if you have or know of any neurodivergent classmates or colleagues within your team or your organisation. We all have people in our lives who are neurodivergent, even if we don't realise it, because quite often not everyone's comfortable talking about their neurodivergent identities. But also, what's really important to note is whoever your target audience is, some of your target audience will be neurodivergent, because there is a massive overlap between neurodivergence and the population as it is. And last but not least, the Equality and Disability Act. We all need to follow ethical and legal standards. Sorry, it's a bit slow for me. So, talking about neurodiversity, this is kind of where there's a difference between what social model disability versus the medical model says. Usually it's recommended to refrain from using language such as low or high functioning rather saying low or high support needs, because it highlights again the fact that a person's ability or value isn't based on how much work they can produce. Also, Asperger's actually, it's not been a medically recognized term or neurodivergence or disability for over a decade now. It's now classified under autism. The reason behind it as well is because Asperger's as a term links back to the Nazi regime with heavy roots in euthanasia and the Nazi ideology of supposed racial purity. So it's quite a big term related to ableism. So we really try to refrain from using that. but people who were diagnosed with Asperger's back when it still was medically diagnosed still use it. So that all can be a personal preference, and it's important to understand that and respect that. In terms of autism specifically, so there's a misconception that we're all a little bit autistic. And I dare to say that all of us have at some point in our lives heard that. However, because autism is referred to as the autism spectrum, many people don't realize that it's not actually less and more. It's not, less autistic and more autistic. It's actually a circular spectrum. And people who are autistic are somewhere on this spectrum and have different motor skills, different sensory needs, different language processing, and so on. So let's now talk about specifically how neurodiversity actually impacts education and the workplace, aside for, of course, the need to comply with ethical and legal standards. Well, in education and higher education specifically, every year 7,900 autistic students drop out of university and higher education. And in the workplace, in the UK, there's currently 6 million known neurodivergent employees, staff members, and 50% of them, 3 million, have reported feeling unsupported and misunderstood and are actively thinking of leaving their company. So that means that if you work in an organization and you have neurodivergent employees, then you are at risk of losing 50% of them. And if you multiply that by the average cost of, someone leaving the workplace and having to hire someone, which is on average about £10,000, not only is it now that neurodiversity can actually benefit you as a workplace, but you need to start thinking about, okay, how do I retain our employees, our students, and ensure that they are happy with the services we are providing them with. I'm sorry, the slides are turning a bit slowly for me. What's also really important that with businesses, the 3 key benefits that neurodiversity presents, the 3 key consequences of not being neurodiversity aware and supportive in the businesses is 1, high turnover, but also loss in productivity potential. So neurodivergent employees and neurodivergent teams have actually been proven to be up to 30% more productive than their neurotypical counterparts. And that's not me saying that any type of neurodiversity is more superior. It's more to highlight the fact that when neurodivergent people receive the support that they need, they are really able to thrive in the workplace and in education. And by not leveraging that, you are losing out on 30% of increased productivity, be that maybe potentially even 30% in increased revenue generated for your organization. And last but not least, in businesses, employee satisfaction, of course, is very important. Next, we have neurodivergent strengths specifically. So when neurodivergent individuals receive the support that they need, this was already touched on earlier. This can include hyperfocus, creative thinking, attention to detail, and special interests. It's really important to note here that, for example, special interests don't just have to be stereotypically masculine interests, like data analysis, computers, planes, dinosaurs, but it can also be, especially for women, young women, special interests can be portrayed as interest in celebrities, makeup, art, and so on. And it's actually one of the reasons why autism in women is often overlooked or misdiagnosed. And attention to detail here, again, can, for example, be stereotypically traditionally in data analysis, but attention to detail could also be having great pattern recognition skills. So our team is fully neurodivergent, and one of our team members has such great behavioral pattern recognition skills and attention to detail that she's able to identify differences in the ways our clients behave and prevent, them feeling unsatisfied or leaving. And it's these kind of small things that other colleagues won't necessarily notice, and it can be a massive advantage to your organization. There are, of course, some disadvantages or struggles that neurodivergent individuals might experience. And that's because at the end of the day, it is a disability, and it is disabling. Again, if you view it as a disability, it can be, a personal choice. However, legally it is defined as one because we need to have initiatives and policies in place to protect minority groups and people who tend to be discriminated against. So some challenges that neurodivergent people might experience is a difference in thinking. This is called top-down versus bottom-up thinking. And it's one of the reasons why actually neurodivergent people struggle in schools or when learning new tasks or with new software at the workplace. Traditionally, as a neurotypical person, you will learn a general concept and then you will learn about the details of it. So you will start at the top and then you'll narrow it down. Versus a neurodivergent person, especially someone who's autistic or has ADHD, will do the opposite. Our brains work better if we learn about the details of a topic and then we branch out. And with that thinking method, you're not relying on previous information, you're taking information as individual parts. So if I give you an example, let's say you walk into a restaurant, right? You walk into a restaurant, you're walking on the street, you open the door, you walk into a restaurant, and then you notice that the food smells nice, or that there's music playing, and you start noticing small little details. So you go from the general to the detailed. Versus for autistic people, ADHDers, people who are neurodivergent, it's the opposite way around. You're walking on a street, you open the door to a venue. First you notice the smell, then you notice the loud noises, then you see all the people. And you take those pieces of information, you put them together and you realize, oh, I'm in a restaurant. Now imagine that's your way of thinking and processing information when it comes to everything in life. But in education, or even when we're at work and we're learning about new tasks or new projects, they're presented as a general concept and then we narrow down. So because of this different way of processing information, neurodivergent people are heavily disadvantaged because the system goes against them. Another challenge that some might experience is processing time. However, again, it's important to know why neurodivergent people might require more processing time. It's because it's been proven that autistic people in particular are actively processing and taking in 30% more information than neurotypical individuals. And that's because neurodivergent people will be recognizing and seeing and hearing other stimuli. Again, talking about my personal experiences, I can, for example, hear electricity buzzing. If there's a plug on, I will be able to hear it. If the TV is on, it's not even on, but it's plugged in, I'll be able to hear the cables. And that can be really distracting, but it can also cause a lot of emotional and energetic drain because I'm taking in more information and I'm having to put more energy into focusing on a conversation with you, for example. Sensory sensitivities, difference in communication style, time awareness, focus, and anxiety. So again, these are differences in how the brain works, but as I mentioned, there is not necessarily a disadvantage and there are ways to go around it. Some adjustments that can help are wearing earplugs and noise-cancelling headphones. I'm sure that all of us at some point have been annoyed by working in a shared office where all of your colleagues or maybe your friends who are working on a project or studying are talking and eating their lunch. Having quiet spaces to relax, focus, assistive technology. Assistive technology can be free, or there's also paid versions, and it can include, for example, speech-to-text writers, which can be really helpful for people with dyspraxia and might have pains in their joints or in their hands, and encouraging the use of fidget tools. So these adjustments specifically are more so for individuals to implement themselves. However, if you are, for example, a manager or a team leader, it is important that we all take responsibility and that we encourage our friends, our colleagues, our family to think about what adjustments could they implement, but could we all implement together and encourage them to use? Because how are we meant to know what will benefit us if we don't actually have a list of what the options are? Now, let's talk about the action steps that, one, you can take as an individual to foster a more inclusive workplace, student space, general environment. And then we'll talk about a few action steps that an organization can make as a whole to foster neuro-inclusivity. The first key step is actually knowing and learning how to respond when someone shares they're neurodivergent. We'll then go on to ways of how not to respond, because unfortunately they're very, very common. There's no one correct way of responding. However, here are a few ways of, you can be inspired by. My particular favorite is when people tell me, congratulations. Reason behind that is because it lightens the mood. It's quite funny, but also for most neurodivergent individuals, it can be scary and difficult to come forward and share your neurodivergence. But it can also, for many people, be something that they only found out recently. I myself only learned about my neurodivergent identity a couple of years ago, because many women and people of color do not tend to be diagnosed until later in life. And then as well, the traditionals, the classics of, how can I support you? Thanks for letting me know. Is there anything that I can do or that I can convey to other people? What's really important to remember is that when someone shares with you that they are neurodivergent, or anything else, even if it's that they are experiencing anxiety or they have any kind of struggle in their life, it's not the neurodivergent person's responsibility to educate others about neurodiversity, because just because you have lived experience in something doesn't mean you actually have expertise in it. You are an expert on your own experiences, just as Becky said before. And so only, expect that from the friend or colleague if they are comfortable sharing so. And talking about, okay, how do we actually not respond? This is really important. These are a few phrases that I myself have experienced, but also that we've received, feedback from our community. A very common phrase is, we're all a little bit autistic, or suddenly everyone is neurodivergent, has ADHD, and so on. So we're all a little bit autistic comes back to what I mentioned at the start. It's not how neurodivergence works. You are born neurodivergent, and it's not something that develops. It's a difference in your brain. And while the spectrum is a spectrum, it's not linear. It's not a little bit less or more. It's circular. And so we're not all on the spectrum. And it's really important to refrain from using language like this, because it invalidates a person's experiences and a person's struggles. And neurodivergence, it's an invisible disability. So it doesn't have a look. We don't actually know what it looks like for every single person, even if they tell you. Me, for example, sharing, I have sensory sensitivities. That's only one aspect of my neurodivergence. Suddenly everyone has ADHD, suddenly everyone is neurodivergent. Again, something that's becoming very common to say lately. The reason why, and I understand where it's coming from, it's because neurodiversity is becoming, more of a common topic for us to speak about. But it's important to remember that, yes, there are more people who are neurodivergent now, but it's actually more people who have a neurodivergent diagnosis. There have always been people who are neurodivergent, and it's always been the same amount. However, we now have more information about neurodiversity, so suddenly people are learning about it and realizing, I actually relate to this quite a lot. What if I am myself? Let me do some research. We have, normalized the discussion, so people are more open to talk about the fact that they are neurodivergent, whereas in the past, people weren't comfortable disclosing that or sharing that with their friends or their colleagues. But then also what's really important to know is that there's more pressure from the public, the neurodivergent community, and from the government to integrate neurodiversity within our systems. And then last but not least, things like, I'm so sorry for you, you must be high functioning, and so on, because it implies that, it's something bad. It's something that you're suffering with. Neurodivergence disability doesn't have to be something negative, doesn't have to be something that you suffer with. There are, traits or struggles that neurodivergent people might experience. However, with the right support, if that is accessible to you, we are able, and you are able, to accommodate those and improve those. So, what are some ways that organizations, specifically as a whole, can be more neuro-inclusive? If the slide would change. So hopefully it will go shortly, but there are 5 key. Okay, yes, we will cover that. There are 5 key ways in which an organization as a whole can be neuro-inclusive. That includes recruitment, onboarding, general long-term support, creating a community and fostering an inclusive and accessible physical space. So in recruitment, if we really generalize recruitment to 2 steps, then we can say that recruitment consists of writing a job application and hiring a person through, for example, an interview. If you are an educational organization, you might be still interviewing students and seeing if, they fit within your educational community. And there are 2 key ways that these 2 processes disadvantage neurodivergent individuals, but can actually be improved. In job application, certain terminology and skills can, demotivate neurodivergent applicants from applying in the first place. One key example is, for example, saying, we're looking for an excellent communicator. Now, of course, every workplace, every organization wants someone who communicates well, right? That's the standard. But by saying excellent, by using that adjective, for someone who's neurodivergent, especially for people who are autistic and they're literal thinkers, an autistic person might struggle to understand, okay, but what does excellent mean in the situation? Because I might define excellent differently to how you define it. And so instead, you can rephrase that and change the narrative to how the person themselves feels when they're a communicator. So for example, instead of saying excellent communicator, you could say confident communicator. Because at that point, I'm able to assess myself. Do I feel confident when I'm speaking with the team or public speaking? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Right? I'm no longer questioning, what do you define as excellent communicator? And if you want to take it a step further and yourself lead by example and be a good communicator, looking for someone to join your team to be promoting confidence.
So unfortunately, it does look like we've lost Avita there. Unfortunately, hopefully she may be able to resume and continue on for us in very quickly. But as we're sort of approaching the sort of the final sort of few minutes of the session today, I just wanted to sort of thank everybody for their attendance, their engagement, and lots of the questions. I know there's been some great conversations and questions that have come through, which is always the best place for this to start. Really, it is those discussion points. For each of the speakers today, we will do sort of follow-up information and send them out. But if I can very quickly just bring the likes of Jag, Emma to the screen.
I think I just...
What's gone on with the technology there? But no, just wanted to sort of wrap things up and sort of conclude today. So apologies, we've had some technical difficulties at the very end. I will reach out to Evita and look at sort of re-recording those sort of sessions. With that, I can bring Jag back on for a quick moment. Just to sort of say thank you, really. I don't quite know what's happened there. It seems to, whether it's the platform we're having issues with or for an internet connection on the other end. I just wanted to sort of say thank you to yourselves for your time today. I'm still not too sure what's going on with there. So just thank you to yourselves for your participation and attendance for it, really.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. I don't think I'm on screen now, so I'm not too sure what's going on there.
I think we're having a few technical issues. Shall we? Should we just? I think we're coming to an end anyway, aren't we? So, okay. On behalf of Martin, can I just say thank you to everybody for being part of this? It's extremely important and really sort of some really fabulous sort of sessions there. And yeah, thank you to everybody for joining, and we'll send the stuff across. See you, everyone. Bye bye.